Hello and welcome to the channel of Hashaliach once again. As always, I trust that God is blessing you this day despite the many chaotic things that are happening in the world. Just keep your eyes on Him and you'll be doing fine. Today is the 10th of October 2024, and I want to talk a little bit more about things which I believe are going to prophetically play out. Now, in my last message, it was entitled "You Are as an Angel of God." I talked about a regime change. The regime of Saul had come to an end. God had rejected that regime, and David was to take his rightful place as king. Now, something I just want to point out in the regime change when Saul was taken down, tragically, his sons were also taken down with him, and especially Jonathan, who was a great friend of David. And it's always worthwhile remembering that in any war, there's always good people that are killed and bad people that are killed. And, this is the way it works out. Just keep praying to the Lord for the protection of people, but it rains on the righteous and on the unrighteous. But ultimately, we must remember what was the eternal destination of Jonathan. He'll be with the Lord. Anyway, I want to move into 2 Samuel chapter 1, Complete Jewish Study Bible, and I'm going to begin at verse 1, and I want to again just show you what I believe is going to come to pass prophetically. Verse 1. Saul had died, and David had been 2 days in Ziklag after returning from the slaughter of the Amalekites. Now, remember, when David and his men in 1 Samuel 30, they'd returned to Ziklag, where David and his men were based, and they found that the Amalekites had come and taken their women and children and goods. And David went after them. God had promised if he went after them, he would be able to get everything back. Nothing would be lost. And so off they went and they slaughtered the Amalekites. And so here we are. On the third day, there came a man from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and earth on his head. So you could picture this like, the tearing of the robes and ashes on the head, and great grief. He approached David, fell to the camp, and prostrated himself. David said to him, "Where are you coming from?" "I escaped from the camp of Israel," he replied. "I have come from the camp of the illegitimate government. That's why I'm here." "Tell me, please, how did things go?" asked David. "The people have fled the battle," he answered, "and many of them are wounded or dead." The illegitimate government is looking like it's over and done with. Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead too. David asked the young man who had told him this, "How do you know that Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead?" The young man who had told him said, "I happened to be in Mount Gilboa when I saw Saul leaning on his spear. The chariots and cavalry were bearing down on him. He looked behind him, saw me, and called to me. I answered, 'Here I am.' He said to me, 'Who are you?' And I answered, 'I am an Amalekite.' He said to me, 'I'm in agony and I am going to die, but I'm still alive. So please stand next to me and kill me.' So I stood next to him and killed him because I was sure he was so badly wounded that he couldn't live. I took the crown that was on his head and the bracelet on his arm, and I brought them here to my lord." See, my lord, I've brought you the booty, the evidence of the good things that I've done against the illegitimate government. You see, I was never for that government. I was just there sort of as a plant. And here I've brought these treasures to you to show you how good I am and that I'm really on your side. Verse 11. Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and likewise all the men who were with him. You see, this young man came with his clothes torn and ash on his head, but it was a deception. But David truly is grieved here. He is truly grieved at what has happened. He takes no pleasure in what's happened. Even though he is the rightful king, he doesn't take any pleasure in the death of the wicked. Saul, anyway, certainly not Jonathan. He doesn't take any pleasure in any death whatsoever, which is unnecessary. Verse 12. They wailed and cried and they fasted until evening for Saul, for Jonathan his son, for David's people, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. You see the great respect that David accords even Saul, a man who had hunted him for many years to try and kill him. But he accepted that God had put him in place as king, initially anyway, before Samuel told him he'd been rejected. But David was very respectful of the office of king. Very, very respectful. Now, at this point, I certainly, when I read this, I think of a man, and he is incredibly respectful of the office of President of the United States. But he's also very respectful of all the rightful offices throughout the United States government. Think on that. Think on what sort of a person that I'm talking about here and how he approaches and views things. It's also worthwhile noting a good number of years ago, I'm sort of digressing here, but it's worthwhile. A number of years ago, when certain people had come up with a plan and they were going to basically reverse things in America for the good, And one of the plans that they had was to actually take out President Obama in a coup. And that's what they planned to do, because they knew this guy was bad news. But then they approached an individual who they wanted to run for president, and they divulged their plans to him. And this person says, no, don't do it that way. Don't do it that way. Let me run, let me win, but let's do things properly. Again, it gives you insight, and just think of what he's been through. Think of the things, not just him, not just his family, but the whole country. But he wanted to do things the right way. And when all this is said and done, I'll tell you this, friends, we will be grateful. We will be grateful, because you would never get to see some of the things that have been exposed, are being exposed now, and will be exposed in the future. You wouldn't have got to see the depths of evil without us travelling this path. It's hard, it's tough, but let's remember also, we as the body of Christ dropped the ball, and this is the situation we are now in. But God in his mercy is hearing our prayers, and things are being turned around. But we need to see the depths of evil. We need to see it, friends. We do. Let's get back to where I was. With me, I'll start again at 12. They wailed and cried, and they fasted until evening for Saul, for Jonathan his son, for Adonai's people, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Many people had fallen. David said to the young man who had told him, "Where are you from?" He answered, "I'm the son of a resident foreigner, an Amalekite." David asked him, "How is it that you weren't afraid to raise your hand to destroy Adonai's anointed?" Now, Saul had been anointed by God and placed as king. But he asked him, he says, "Why were you not afraid to, when you say you've killed, why weren't you afraid to raise your hand to destroy Adonai's anointed?" David called one of his young men and said, "Go over to him and kill him." The man struck him down. Now, this would have been with a sword. He would have killed this man by the sword. The man struck him down and he died. David said to him, "Your blood is on your own head. Your own mouth convicted you when you said, 'I killed Adonai's anointed.'" Now, the point I want to make here is this Amalekite, he understood a regime change was taking place. Saul was dead. He knew about David. As we read previously, it talks about David killing his 10,000. Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his 10,000s. David was well known as a mighty, mighty warrior, and a regime change was taking place. This Amalekite, he knew that basically his time was up. And so he played out this great deception to try and endear himself to David, to get on side, to come under his wing and be protected and just carry on living from there. Basically, I need to save my skin and I'll do whatever it takes. So if I take these things that I've picked up from the battlefield where Saul and his son have fallen, David will be mightily pleased with me because he is now going to be king and his enemy has fallen. But he did not count on David's heart and how pure David was and how highly he held Saul, despite the fact Saul wanted to kill him. Excuse me. Cayenne pepper and nettle tea. You know, in between giving you these messages, I'm sure I'm giving you some good health tips. Excuse me. So, regime change. This is what's going to happen. You're going to get people coming from the bad side, and they're going to come along with their BS stories, lies, deception, to try and endear themselves to David. They're going to and try to endear themselves to King David to save their skins. But King David was able to discern things. David had discernment. Excuse me. And he knew this man was not a good man. This man wasn't pure. This man's intentions were not good. He might have come from the enemy camp making out as though he was somebody good, but no, David discerned. Now, very briefly, I'm just going to go back to 1 Samuel chapter 31, and I want to read from verses 4 to 6. This is about the death of Saul. Saul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through with it. Otherwise, these uncircumcised men will come, run me through, and make sport of me." But his armor bearer refused. He was too frightened. So Saul took his sword and fell on it. When his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, Saul fell on his own sword. His armor bearer saw it that Saul was dead, he too fell on his own sword and died with him. Thus Saul, his 3 sons, his armour-bearer, and all his men died that same day together. Saul fell on his own sword. It's recorded in God's word. This Amalekite had made this story up, as I mentioned. What's going to happen? You're going to see more and more Amalekites, more and more people from the enemy camp recognize the regime change is going to happen. You can't stop it. They need to save their skins. Now, some will leave the enemy camp and genuinely turn to the good side, genuinely. Many others will be trying to save their skin, and they'll come up with elaborate stories and maybe offerings and gifts to David, but their intentions are not pure. They are evil, and they will do whatever it takes to save their own skins, to lie in wait and to rise up again at some point in the future when they increase their numbers once again. But David has discernment. Now, I'm not saying he will discern correctly in every single situation, but he will discern that many of these people do not have good intentions at heart. And he will deal with them appropriately. David sent one of his men to kill the Amalekite. He says, kill the man. Struck him down with a sword. David sent one of his men to kill this enemy. David will also ask his men or command his men to take these Amalekites to Guantanamo Bay to have them killed. Amalekites as in enemy. King David did it thousands of years ago. It's going to play out again. And it is playing out again. Many things have been happening behind the scenes for a long, long time. If you want, go back to one of the videos I did where I had a prophetic vision about Guantanamo Bay. I can't remember exactly when it was I posted that. If you're interested, go back and listen to it. But it's playing out again. The regime change, the rats deserting the sinking ship. They will try to endear themselves to the new regime, and many of them will be caught out. King David will discern properly, and the enemy will be dealt with appropriately. That young man died by the sword. Many people are going to die by the sword in Guantanamo Bay. We don't take any pleasure in the death of the wicked. We don't take any pleasure in this, and the Bible makes that very, very clear. We should not take pleasure in the death of the wicked. But we can rejoice in the fact that God is turning things around. And there will be peace again in the land. The Lord bless you. Until next time.